Hey everybody, it's Yu-Gi-Oh! Master 88 here, and welcome to this edition of the Linux Report. Linux kernel 6.15.1 ships with fix to prevent Snapdragon X1 GPUs from severely overheating. Greg Croa Hartman today released Linux kernel 6.15.1 as the first stable point release to the Linux kernel 6 to the Linux 6.15 kernel that first shipped a week and a half ago. Linux kernel 6.15.1 brings an initial batch of fixes, which are particularly noteworthy if trying to use a Qualcomm Snapdragon X1 laptop on Linux. Linux kernel 6.15.1 is predominantly made up of mini device tree backports for various ARM SoC platform fixes. Most of the Linux 6.15.1 changes are these DT backports. Of those standing out are a number of Qualcomm Snapdragon X1 fixes. The most prominent of these Snapdragon X1 fixes is for the Linux 6.15.1 kernel is now applying a consistent critical thermal shutdown temperature and ensuring GPU cooling for these setups. Stephen Gerhold, sorry if I pronounce your name incorrectly, originally authorized the patch back in February for ensuring GPU cooling with the Snapdragon X1 E80 and was added to Linux kernel 6.16 and is now backported for Linux 6.15. Stephen explained that with that patch. And as you can see, folks, the explanation is right here. Now that now that's it for Linux 6.15.1 stable for protecting the X1 GPU. See last month's article looking at the current rough shape of Qualcomm Snapdragon X1 laptop support and performance on Linux. And with that, folks, that is it for this edition of the Linux Report. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did, and until next time, this is Yu-Gi-Oh! Master 88 saying see you later.